Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make these absolutely delicious paleo snacks. They're called apple chips or apple crisps, and they're really simple to make and really yummy and crunchy. Let's get into it. Apple chips are a really nutritious and tasty paleo snack that you can make in advance and eat for ages after you've made them because they're just completely dried out chips, essentially. When I make apple chips, I generally do it because I've got too many apples on hand. I love eating apples, and I will eat 2 apples a day usually. And if I have too many on hand because I have a couple of apple trees in my backyard, this is a great way to kind of process them so that they are there for me later on when I want to have a snack and I'm really hungry, or I can't be bothered cooking something but I just want something to nibble on. These are really great for like a TV kind of snack. And yeah, they're fantastic and healthy because they're just made out of apples. Now, when I make these apples, I generally make them from crab apples. Regular apples tend to look like this. Sort of average size, normal apples. These are all off one of my apple trees, so they're a little bit banged up. But that is essentially a normal apple. A crab apple, on the other hand, looks like this. As you can see, they are way smaller, and they are much more similar to the apples that we would have eaten as cavemen hundreds and thousands of years ago. Now, essentially what happened was, over the course of human history, we've taken apples like this off of apple trees, and the biggest and tastiest apples, we've planted the seeds from them or grafted the branch from one of those trees to make something that is more like this. The modern apple is very sweet and much larger than its ancient equivalent. The closest thing we have today to the paleo apple that started it all is these kinds of crab apples. Now, they're very high in minerals, they're really good for you, and they have got a lot of vitamins and nutrition, especially in the skin. When you eat a crab apple, it tastes very kind of sour, I guess, kind of bitter. It's not the sweet and delicious treat that you know of from a regular apple. And obviously they're way smaller. They're very small. I think that crab apples still exist because when you chuck apple seeds, sometimes they'll kind of revert back a little bit when they grow into a plant, whereas with the specialized breeding programs we have to make our big, sweet, juicy Gala and Granny Smith apples that you know of today, you don't really have these kinds of varieties being grown and being chosen for. However, they do still exist, and if you know of a source of crab apples, this is a really good way to get the goodness of the crab apples without the kind of bitter, funny flavour that they have. They're really high in tannins, and just the flavour isn't really one that you will be like, oh yeah, an apple, yum. You're kind of a bit like, huh, if that makes sense. But this recipe eliminates that problem and allows you to have the goodness of apple chips and health benefits of eating crab apples without actually eating straight crab apples. So, let's get started. There are quite a few ways to make apple chips, and the way that I'm going to show you is obviously not the only way of doing it. I like to use this guy, my vegetable spiralizer. Now, you simply have to take out the piece of the spiralizer with the chips in it, and that is what creates that the pasta effect for zucchini pasta and that sort of thing. Once you've removed this, it's just going to slice in a spiral motion very thinly the vegetable or fruit in question, in this case an apple. So I'm going to take this apple, and essentially what you need to do in order to get a successful spiralized apple is to cut it like this. So basically you cut a slice of it just to the core and then stop. If you have an apple corer, I definitely recommend that you use it for this, because when the seeds of the apple get caught in the spiralizer, it does tend to kind of muck things up a little bit. I'm also going to cut off the top and the bottom of the apple, just so that there's a flat surface for the spiralizer to work like that. Then it's just a matter of attaching it in on top, into the teeth, and putting that inside the machine, like so. So it's in there. I'm pressing down. When you start the spiralizing process, and I'm going to start it now, you just keep an even pressure and turn the spiralizer and you will end up with apple chip slices. I'll show you what they look like. So I just did that whole apple that quickly, which is really awesome. And essentially, because you've made that cut, it doesn't do a full, like one piece. They actually break into single slices like that. Now that's really, really thin. I don't know if you can see how thin that is. And that means that when you go to dry these apple chips out, they're going to dry relatively quickly. The thicker that you slice them, the longer they're going to take to dry out. So I like to make them really, really thin so that I can get apple chips really quickly because I get excited about them. Obviously, they're fine to eat just like this as well. And the other and more old-fashioned and traditional method is to use one of these and just slice like so. Obviously, that's going to take a hell of a lot longer, but you'll still end up with your apple chips. And they won't be that perfect round shape either, but they're a similar kind of thickness to what the spiralizer makes. And it's definitely an easy way to get around the core problem of the fact that you're processing the apple core in the spiralizer, whereas you're not in this one, unless you have an apple core, in which case your problems are solved. So, yeah, so that's going to turn into an apple chip. So basically now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and cut up all of my apple chips, and then I'll pick this up again and show you how I season them and how I dry the apple chips out in order to make yummy, tasty snacks that keep for ages. I'll be right back. Hey guys. So I've got pretty much enough for what I would consider one fairly decent dose of apple chips. As you can see, because they're drying out slowly, being exposed to the air, they're kind of turning that brown colour that apples always turn. Because you're dehydrating them completely, they're going to end up completely brown, so there's sort of no point putting any remedial work into keeping them that fresh green colour because they're not going to stay that way once you dehydrate them. I generally add cinnamon to apple chips, and I think it is absolutely the tastiest way you could have them. And I am pretty heavy-handed with it as well, as you can probably see. I'm also going to add a tiny dash of nutmeg to it, nowhere near as much, and also a tiny dash of cloves, because I love the flavour of cloves. So sort of that much. And then I just get in there with my hands and just manually mix until everything is sort of covered with the same amount of apple chippy goodness. And the smell is already beautiful. So as you can see, I've added loads. Obviously, it's your own personal taste how much you want, but I really, really like cinnamon, especially. I'm a bit of a cinnamon fiend. Okay, so there you go. Oops. Now, there are several ways that you can get these to that kind of crunchy, dry chip stage. I like to use my dehydrator for this, but obviously if you don't have a dehydrator, there are definitely other options for you. You can put them in the oven. If you just put them on any kind of surface that's got slats, like a metal slatted surface, like a cooling rack that you would use if you'd finished making a cake, then put them on the lowest setting in the oven with the door slightly open. That will do the trick. Definitely dry them out really quickly, actually faster than with a dehydrator. And if you're not on the whole raw food kick, then you probably don't care that they've been heated slightly and the sweetness is a little bit of that cooked flavour instead of the raw flavour. It depends on what you prefer though in terms of whether you like cooked apples or not. With a dehydrator, obviously that keeps the temperature down below that cooking temperature, and so the flavour is of raw apples basically, but in chip form. I think that with the dehydrator it's really easy to use because you can just leave them in there and they'll be done without you having to worry about them, whereas with the oven you're going to kind of keep track of them a little bit and make sure they don't get burnt and that sort of thing. So in that way the dehydrator is probably easier. The traditional method obviously is to take them outside on a tray and with a fly screen or some kind of net over the top of them so that flies and other animals can't steal your apples away, and just air dry them outside in the sun. And that way works as well. I've done all three in the past, but today I'm just going to do the dehydrator thing because it's the easiest and quickest for me. So with my dehydrator, this is I've shown you guys before my dehydrator. And what I'm going to do is turn this so you can see. each tray in my dehydrator looks like this. And all that you need to do is take the apples and just put them on the tray like so. And it's really, really easy. And once the tray is filled, then you go to the next layer. With a dehydrator, it's definitely more energy efficient to use the entire dehydrator all at once, because it will save you electricity and it will save you time if you do everything at once. There's usually not much point only doing one shelf's worth of apples or whatever. And if you can come up with several different recipes for a dehydrator, then you can do them all at once. And that's generally the easiest and the best way of working with a dehydrator. Please don't just do one shelf of food, because it is a waste of energy, and it's better if you double up as much as possible. Just like back in the day when the people, the wives of the soldiers in World War II who were on rationed gas and rationed cooking, especially in the UK and in Australia, they would use a steamer and steam their vegetables, and then on top of that they would have another steamer steaming something else, and then on top of that they would put another steamer, so the steam was working sort of on 4 levels and saving them energy and their fuel, because their fuel was so scarce back then. This is the same kind of thing. We're trying to reduce the amount of carbon that we're burning, so we'll do multiple levels of dehydratedness. So I've pretty much done an entire tray's worth. This is fairly sparsely populated, so I'll be able to kind of move them around and fit a few more in the gaps and that sort of thing. And once the whole thing is loaded up, I will be back. So now my dehydrator is absolutely brimming with apple slices, and every single layer is absolutely full of them, see? Now, essentially, it depends on the humidity and the ambient air temperature, the strength of your dehydrator, and how thick you've sliced your apple slices to know how long this is going to take, this whole process of drying them out. Obviously, if you do it in the oven, it's going to be faster than if you do it in the dehydrator, and if you're just doing it by putting them outside, the traditional method, it's going to take a couple of days. I generally just set my dehydrator to level 2, which is here. And I will leave it switched on like that until they're dry enough. And the way that I test it is I turn it off, I take a piece out, and I try it, and I see what I think. Obviously, the drier that the apple chips are, the longer that they will keep for. If they still have moisture in them, you don't want to keep them for too long. It's the same way that a sort of a semi-dried out tomato is not going to last as long as a completely dried tomato. So that's basically it. I hope you guys enjoy your apple chips, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome recipes. Bye!